So again, welcome. This is, I guess, our third Cobalt Property Management meeting. I apologize for the background. I got the Cobalt Banker in the back, but I got the Cobalt on my chest. So I guess we're double representing today, which is good. So, anyhow, we are recording this as well. So if you missed something, we'll go ahead and we'll get the recording out to you. We're actually posting it live on our Facebook feed, but the Facebook post that it's in right now is a private one. So most of you won't be able to see it in that fashion. But we'll go ahead and get the recording out to you. And then maybe the next time we do this, we might go ahead and post this on a regular live feed. But for now, we're still kind of experimenting just a little bit with that. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a little different than the last one that you guys have done. So let me give you a couple of ground rules. We have a chat box and a Q&A. We would prefer you put the questions in the Q&A, but it really doesn't matter. Drake is going to go ahead and monitor those. So if you struggle with where to type your questions, just put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat box. It doesn't necessarily matter. Also, everybody is automatically muted. So if you want to say something, you have a little option there to kind of wave your hand, or just put something in the chat box if you're struggling with that. And we'll go ahead and, depending upon what the question is, Drake will monitor it. If it's kind of super critical to what we're talking about, then he'll interrupt us and say, hey, what about this? Otherwise, we'll take all the questions at the end and we'll kind of do our thing. So again, welcome. It's May 1st. We've made it through another month. I think our last meeting was about 3 weeks ago. And when I signed off on that meeting, we were in effect saying, maybe we'll meet again before May, or maybe we won't, depending upon what's going on. There was probably 15 times between our last meeting and today that I thought, hey, we're going to have another meeting before May 1st. And then I kind of paused and took a deep breath and said, okay, we're going to go ahead and roll till May 1st. This meeting may be a little premature because I'm sure most of you on the call are wondering, has my tenant paid their rent yet? So the answer for about 100 of our landlords, maybe a little bit more than 100, is yes, they have. Which, by the way, that 100% as an overall percentage is pretty good. So we very well may do another updated call next Friday. That'll be the 7th, of course, or the 8th, and we'll be just that much farther on to knowing whether or not we had any major issues for the May rent. Because I will tell you, about a week ago, 10 days ago, and even 5 days ago, I was very, very concerned that we might have some issues with tenants paying their rent on May 1st. So far, it looks like maybe May is going to look like April, which for most of our landlords, April looked pretty good. So we'll get into a little bit more details on that. And if you're trying to figure out timing here, unless you guys have a whole bunch of questions and a whole bunch of dialogue, I think we should be able to wrap this call up in about 20 minutes. I think 30 minutes would be a little bit long, but again, that'll be up to you guys. So you can see most of us on the call. Again, this will be the 3rd or 4th time we've done this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of times with the bios. Aubrey, of course, as you guys know, runs the department, and Francine is the right-hand person. And Tiffany's been with us, I think, longer than anybody. She's our field person showing the tenants. Grace does all of our repairs. Drake is actually the broker of record for Cobalt, and that's been the case now for a little while. And pretty soon they're going to push me out the door, and I'll just stand over there and empty the trash cans, and the rest of Drake and Drew and the team will handle that. Drew, of course, does the sales side on the property. Or on the sales side, Cobalt Banker, he's the broker owner there. And of course, there's me. So again, just to kind of reset the stage, sometimes this can get a little confusing. Oh, and then there's Austin. We didn't have a slide for Austin, but Austin's over there in the corner if you can see him. He actually is the real star here, gets no recognition, but he basically does everything. So just 30 seconds real quick. Again, sometimes there's some confusion. Most of you have known us as Cobalt Banker Town and Country, at least for the last 15 years. And it's been about 18 months ago that we spun off the property management side of the business, and we are now doing our property management under Cobalt Property Management. So that should be old news for most of you, but it is kind of funny. I have people regularly will reach out, and they kind of missed the memo that we are Cobalt Property Management, but we all are together, and Drew and Drake are the brokers, and I kind of stand in and do my thing. So, so let's talk about where we've been. Okay, so if these slides look familiar to you, they should, because these are the exact same slides that we had in our first two meetings. The only difference is I put a green button or a red button. If nothing has changed, you've got the red no change button. If something has changed, we have the green new button. So I'm going to quickly go through these. And of course, if there's some questions, raise your hand or type it in the chat. So we're continuing to collect our payments like we have been doing regularly online. We are advertising the vacant properties. We are processing the applications through. And we're doing our condition checks, and we're sending out our monthly statements to our owner. Repair requests are being processed as normal, and monthly services are going on as normal, and we're collecting the rent. So nothing has changed. And by the way, that's basically nothing has changed, not just in the COVID era. That's what we've been doing. So there's been very, very little or no change to any of those things. Now, something that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about in our last two meetings, which I do want to talk about now, without getting into them specifically, we have several of our properties that have lease renewals that have triggered May 1st, or maybe they're coming up on the 15th or June 1st. Francine, for the most part, in the office. Wait, Francine. Okay, Francine is our staff person at Cobalt Property Management, who handles, pretty much 100% of the lease renewals. So we've been taking these case by case. My recommendation to Francine, and she may have talked to some of you individually, if you have a lease renewal, for example, that the tenant's lease expired on April 30th and it needs to be renewed, we've been kind of taking those on a let's just go slowly and not necessarily do a renewal on May 1. So if you fall into that category and you have a tenant that's now technically on a month-to-month as of May 1st, or maybe their lease is going to expire on June 1st, then let's reach out, let's have that conversation, talk to Francine, talk to me, talk to Aubrey. But right now I'm thinking, let's just kind of get a little bit of stability before we come over to a tenant and say, hey, let's renew. Now, the flip side of that is if the tenant comes to us and say, hey, I want to stay and I want to renew, and they're proactively coming to us on that, then sure, by all means, unless you guys have other plans, let's go ahead and get that renewed. And the main reason I want to be a little cautious on those renewals is because, in many cases when we're doing a renewal, we're also doing a rent increase. And I'm a little hesitant to go to a tenant today who right now I just want them to pay their rent. And that would be a plus. So going to them now and saying, oh, by the way, we'd like to, do a cost of living rent increase, a 2% increase, a 4% increase, or maybe some of you have tenants that are maybe paying a little light. So our internal policy right now is we're going to let those roll for the next couple of weeks or even maybe the next month. And we're going to kind of get a little bit of stability on where we are with the COVID stuff. And then we're going to address those expired leases. And by the way, when I say an expired lease, the lease is still in full force and effect. It's on a month-to-month basis. So we just don't have this certainty of 6 months or 12 months or longer as far as the lease is concerned. So I don't want anybody to be too concerned about, what does that mean if my tenant's on a month-to-month. Now, if you feel differently, like we always say with everything when we deal with our landlords, if you're like, no, Lance, I appreciate what you're saying, or I don't appreciate what you're saying, I want to approach the tenant right now, and I want to put a lease renewal in front of them. And by the way, I'd like to raise the rent 10%. We work for you. So you let us know. I think that's a terrible idea, and we'll let you know that. But if that's what you want to do, we will march forward and see if we can successfully do that. So that is a little bit different than what we've talked about before. Normally by this time, Francine would have sent information out to the tenants and would have indicated, hey, here's your new lease and here's your extension, et cetera, et cetera. So I do see something in the Q&A, Drake. I don't know if that's pertinent to this right now. I'm going to keep going. If you want to interrupt me, just jump in and we can deal with that question.
Yeah, I think, it's probably worth talking about. I don't know if you want to open it up and read it or have me read it.
Yeah, well, let me pull it up here. You know what? I'm struggling to pull it up. Why don't you read it and tell us what it is?
Yeah, so the city of Moreno Valley passed an ordinance that late fees can't be assessed to any rentals if the tenant can prove they've been impacted by a COVID-related incident.
Correct. And if you were on the call, and this, by the way, that's not just a Moreno Valley deal. If you were on the call 3 weeks ago, we showed you a few forms. There's a couple of brand new forms that the California Association of Realtors has put out. And one of those forms basically is specifically dealing with tenants that have raised their hands. They're saying, I cannot pay my rent. And the reason I cannot pay my rent has something to do with COVID related. I've lost my job, or I've lost daycare, or I basically don't have the ability to pay. Within that form, there is basically a negotiation that takes place, and that partially that negotiation says, okay, well, when do you think you can pay? All right. So we talked about this 3 weeks ago, and I actually misspoke. Somebody had asked the question, or I just answered it and said, oh, by the way, late fees apply. I think Aubrey immediately, kicked me and said, no, they don't. Okay. So during this time, if we have a tenant who's not paying their rent and they have provided a valid documentation, they've lost their job or they're laid off, in that particular case, we're going to work on a payment plan on when that rent is going to be paid, and there will be no late fees. Okay. And that's not just Moreno Valley. So currently we're not charging late fees. Now, if we've got a tenant that's late and they're just late, and they haven't given us any documentation or anything in the fact that says, hey, this is why I'm late, we're going to post those late fees. Okay. Now, if they come back to us after the fact and says, well, wait a minute, I was late for the following reason, we'll take those on a case-by-case basis. But right now, I wouldn't, as a general rule, the goal right now is to get the tenants to pay their rent. And if they happen to pay it a couple of days late, I don't know that I would spend a whole lot of time us arguing over a late fee, but we will take those case by case. Okay. So hopefully that satisfied that answer. If not, type a chat back in, or we can unmute you, and you can tell me or tell us where you think you want to do something differently. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Okay, this next page, this is the exact same page that we had in place 3 weeks ago. As you can see, nothing's changed. So the leases are still in effect. Rent is still due on May 1st. A large percentage of our tenants pay online. Again, this is where we had late fees apply. We just talked about that. Late fees apply unless they can basically tell us that for the following reason they're COVID impacted. And they do have to give us some documentation to that effect. I forgot to change the date, but I'm over here. Section 8 will pay the rent. It says April 1st. That should say May 1st. And they did pay. Tenants not paying do continue to pose special challenges. That's the same. I said earlier there's no evictions, but on the next slide, you're going to see there is a slight change to the evictions. We're going to talk to that in a little bit. And again, fortunately, we didn't have to deal with this too much, or frankly, really much at all. But as far as using security deposits to pay rent. So I'm going to next slide. Again, most things here haven't changed a little bit, but we are showing vacant properties. When we talked about before, we weren't showing properties necessarily, but we are showing properties, but we're only showing properties to tenants that have been approved. Okay. So if someone just calls and says, hey, I want to just go see Main Street, we're saying, okay, great. We'd love to show it to you, but let's get an application in and let's check you out. And let's just make sure that this is not a looky-loo situation. Having said that, those tenants, we're encouraging them, hey, look at the photos online, drive through the neighborhood, feel free to get out of the car, walk around the property a little bit and check it out. Currently not doing interior inspections on the occupied properties.
And then just real quick to add on that, we are following, the guidelines, the CDC guidelines while we're showing those, wear mask and being safe and doing all that.
Right. 100%. And as you can see, none of us here have masks on, but we are all 75 or 80% of the staff is working from home. The ones that are in the office, we're in private conference rooms with doors closed and hand sanitizer and gloves. And the same thing, of course, like Drake said, same thing applies on when we're showing the properties and we're doing lease signs. Now, again, on the prior page, I said there's no change to the evictions, just to make sure we're all current on the update. As it stands right now, it appears as though, and this could change, Governor Newsom could change things, but right now, any changes that I see coming out of Governor Newsom don't seem to be speeding things up. If anything, they seem to be prolonging things. So right now, if you are in a very unfortunate situation where you have a tenant who hasn't paid, and we do look like we're heading towards an eviction, we won't even be able to file that eviction until August. Okay. In part because there's an order against basically, processing unlawful detainers and evictions, and then and also in part because, as we've indicated last month, the courthouses are basically closed to evictions, so we couldn't do them even if we wanted to. So that's a little bit of the challenge. The good news is that we have very, very few of our tenants, and if you happen to be an owner on the call who's like, oh my gosh, this is me, I feel horrible. The good news is it's a very small percentage of our owners who are in that situation. I'm talking like 1%, less than 1% of our landlords are in that type of situation. No change on the limited walk-in business to the office right now. We've got the sign on the door that we're all too familiar with, which basically says, we're closed to walk-in customers. We're still open, but email, phone, text message, electronically. And again, we actually have no change. We are doing leases. Without Tiffany, you don't have to jump on, but we've leased several properties in the month of April, done several move-ins, several lease signings, several showings. So, that's good. Honestly, on April 1st, I don't know that I would have expected us to rent as many properties in the month of April as we did. And we did pretty good. We did pretty darn good on that. And Austin answers most of the phones most of the time. Our phones are continuing to ring. And as a matter of fact, I would say on the property management side of our business, I don't know that the phones are much slower than they were a month ago. And if you'll see Austin, he's shaking his head saying, no, the phone rings a lot. And I'm in the office a lot, almost every day. Austin's in the front room, I'm behind him, and I'll ask him to do something, and 90% of the time he's like, hold on a minute, I'm on the phone, I'll get back to you when I get off the phone. And it's all day. So very good news. We are very active with that in that regard, and I that surprises me, to be honest with you. Okay, we do certainly have a lot of uncertainty ahead. That's not changing. Literally this week, I went on, I think Wednesday, I came into the office, had a meeting, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we're going to possibly start reopening. Let's get prepared for reopening. And then on Thursday, I came in the morning and said, oh my gosh, we're not reopening. County of Riverside, some of you guys we basically service the 4 counties in Southern California: Los Angeles, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Orange. Sorry, drew a blank there for a second. And the counties they're kind of independent. So I know a lot of our people on the call don't live in California. You're in other parts of the state or you're other parts of the country. And right now, this is a county by county thing. If you've been following the news, Orange County is going to battle with Governor Newsom. Riverside County 2 days ago, or less than 36 hours ago, I'm not sure what his title is, but a gentleman from the county health department said, no, we're on lockdown until June 19th. Yesterday, 2 of our county board of supervisors said, no, he's going rogue. We're going to go a different direction. So let's just say there's a lot of fluidity going on here. So we're just working with that, and of course trying to stay within the guidelines, of course. And then at the same time, we need to follow the rules. I mean, at the end of the day, we got to follow the rules. We need to keep our employees safe. We need to keep the public safe, and we certainly don't want to run afoul of what the rules are. So we'll leave that part alone. So having said that, there's a lot of uncertainty, but just relax. We got this. We're doing pretty well so far. And when I say we, I literally mean us as a management company. I think we have an extremely good grip on where we are. Business-wise, I'm getting calls and text messages regularly, and people are saying, well, how's business? And I said, well, this is the deal. Business is a little slower depending upon what you're talking about. But our whole focus for the last month has been on operations. I mean, how do we answer the phones? How do we show properties? How do we do a lease execution? How do we deal with tenants that aren't paying? So from an operational standpoint, we're doing just fine. Again, we're working within the guidelines that we can. And thank God we are in that type of business that we can work remotely, and we don't necessarily have to see our clients every day face to face. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this, and this is where this meeting could go from a 20 or 30-minute meeting into a much longer meeting. So, and by the way, I think I know my audience pretty well. Okay, most of the folks on this call are either investors or current clients of ours. Maybe you're not a client of ours. I have invited other folks that aren't currently clients of Cobalt Property Management or Cobalt Banker Town and Country. But most of us are real estate minded. Most of us own rentals and are clients of ours. So we're probably thinking along the same wavelength here, but I'm going to venture into the realm of the political. It's always dangerous on these type of calls. So if you're not familiar with AB 828, this is an assembly bill, state of California. This is a bill that's basically been introduced by Assemblyman Phil Ting out of San Francisco. And the bill does a lot. Okay, by the way, this is not a law. This is not current law. It was passed by the Assembly, and it is now sitting in the California State Senate. If the California State Senate signs this, and this is where over the last 10 days I've been, I think we might want to do an emergency meeting with all of our landlords and talk. If we talk about anything, we might just want to talk about this, okay? Because this bill terrifies me. It should terrify everybody on this call who owns real estate. And without getting into the nuts and bolts of it, the gist of it is it would be a legislated rent reduction of 25% across the board on all of the properties that you folks own and rent right now, okay? It does a lot of other things, but the gist of it is it would be a 25% reduction in rent for a 12-month window. Now, I'm going to try to stay out of the political ring, but most of you know that I've been doing this for a little while, and many of you together, we went through the mortgage crisis, and we were holding hands from 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and we struggled through a multiple year recovery. And some of us might say, we're still in a recovery. Forget about the COVID thing. There can be an argument to be made, at least in the Inland Empire, that we never completely recovered from the mortgage meltdown in 2006, 7, 8. I would make that argument, by the way. I would make that argument right now that there's a lot of evidence, and forget about right now. I would have made the argument 2 months ago. There's a lot of evidence that said we are still reeling from the mortgage meltdown. Part of that was, in my opinion, a bunch of horrible, horrible legislation that had good intentions, but at the end of the day, it took a crisis and it extended it for a decade, all right? I don't want to be over dramatic. However, if this bill passes or something similar to this bill passes, it will take our existing crisis and it'll turn it into a multiple year crisis. And it may already be a year crisis. So in my humble opinion, let's just suppose it's going to take us, let's just say it takes us a year. God, that sounds horrible. But let's just suppose it takes a year to kind of sort of get back to something that looks like a little bit normal. And I'm not talking about going to baseball games and football games. If something like this passes, I think it'll take that year and it'll turn it into 5 or even more. So I am imploring you guys to do your own research on California Assembly Bill AB 828. And if you are the type of individual that writes letters or makes phone calls to your representative, I would encourage you to do that. Now, if you think this is a great idea, then fine, then take that angle. But if you own rental property in California, I think most of you will probably feel that this is not such a great idea, and you will want to. Hey, Darnett says you can't hear me. You probably have. I'm assuming everybody else can hear me because nobody else is saying that. You must have a problem on your computer, so maybe tinker around with your volume settings. But if you can't get that figured out, we'll send you an email with the recording, and then you can listen to it at a later time. Okay, so that's that's kind of all I have to say about AB 828. So I don't think I see any questions in the chat box. I thought we might. Oh, it looks like one just popped up. Why am I not able to open up the Q&A box, Greg? What is that? There's a question in there now. Is it about the bill?
Yeah, I'll read it to you.
Okay.
Hey Lance, I heard we can now convert our California properties from single family homes to triplexes by converting the garage to an additional unit and adding a tiny home. Can you speak to what Cobalt is doing to make this a reality for
Oh
us?
my goodness. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, it's funny. I don't have a slide for this, and I'm about 2 to 3 weeks behind on that. But the short answer is yes. And I have a whole bunch of information regarding the legislation that went into effect on January 1st. And that basically allows single family property owners to basically have what's referred to as an ADU, or an accessory dwelling unit. I have a great relationship with, by the way, if any of you guys have watched any of the market forecast stuff we've done, our key sponsor, our platinum sponsor this year and for several years has been Back Porch Homes. And matter of fact, I think one of the other guys is actually even is on our Zoom call right now. So this is the deal. We're going to get you some more detailed information out on that. I frankly would have, had we not been in the COVID-19 arena and dealing with, like I said a minute ago, just day-to-day operations, I would have already sent this information out to you and said, hey, we all need to take a look at this. I think it's not for everybody. Make no mistake about it. It's not for everybody. But I believe a good percentage of our current landlords are going to be in a position to say, hey, this makes sense for me. And whether it's converting a garage, which by the way, I don't know that that's going to work for most of our properties. This is not what I think would be the best solution, is to doing some garage conversions. But literally doing a full-blown detached accessory dwelling unit, just a little mini granny flat, or casita kind of a thing that we've seen for years. So I'll tell you what we're going to do is, since we do seem to be getting into again, I hesitate to say we're getting into some sort of sense of normalcy, but we appear to be a little bit closer to normal than we were a month ago, although sometimes I feel farther away. But at any rate, we have a whole bunch of information on that. We will get that out to you. And I'll tell you what, we're going to do better yet. We'll send you some information via email. We'll send you a video, a link along with that email. And then within the next 2 weeks, we will do another webinar that is strictly devoted to accessory dwelling, because it's a lot. We could do a half hour to an hour just on that alone. So great question. I've been meaning to bring it to you, but we've just been so focused on some other things. Okay, I do see a chat box from Linda. Could owners be forced to contradict a valid contract they have with the tenant? How could this be legal? I don't know what that means, Linda. Hey Drake, you want Linda, if we unmute you, do you want to maybe explain that question a little further? The 828. Okay, I got you. Yeah. Well, first of all, I absolutely believe it is unconstitutional, and this is the state interfering with your contract. You have a contract with the tenant that says that the tenant has agreed to pay you X amount of dollars. It is complete, in my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but complete contract interference. But hey, we are in interesting times, and we are doing interesting things. So is this a constitutional proposal? I don't believe so. I don't like it. And by the way, the graphic that I have on the screen, I don't know if any of you guys are members of the California Apartments Association, CAA. I ripped this image off of their website. So if you want to go to CAA's website and get a little bit more information, or just do a Google search on Assembly Bill or AB 828, there's a ton of information. The information that basically is opposed to it, their core argument, or one of their core arguments, is it's unconstitutional and it's contract interference and it's basically illegal. Okay. Having said that, and I may be wrong, but again, verify this on your own, this passed the California Assembly with not one no vote. Okay. That doesn't mean it was unanimous yeses, but there were enough yeses to get it done, and then just a whole bunch of abstentions and just basically not present votes on the other side. So that's a scary thought, but it is right now in the Senate, and it's kind of going through its process. Okay, so we are at about 30 minutes. I think I have just a couple more slides and then we'll open it for some questions. If we don't have any, we'll call it a day and I'll thank you for coming. So this is, again, this hasn't changed. You guys all should have our 24-hour after hours number. The reality is this number is more for our tenants than it is for our landlord, because the tenants are the ones that sometimes wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a burst hot water heater. But if you're an owner and you can't sleep at night, call that number. Or of course you can call during normal business hours. That's my direct cell phone number. I'm pretty much 24/7 as well. And you can call me evenings, weekends, whatever happens to be the same. And we don't have Drake's number on here. Maybe when we do our next call, we'll put Drake's number on there as well. And so that's all I have today. So let's see. I do see something else in the chat box. Let me read this from Sebastian. We live out of state. Not a California resident. Which legislator do we write to? Yes, it's Assemblyman Ting, T-I-N-G. Okay. And he's out of, basically his district is Western San Francisco. Is a legislator for the property code? No, he's in San Francisco. He's in the Bay Area, and Bay Area is not the Inland Empire. Let's face it. And so anyway, Assemblyman Ting, T-I-N-G, out of San Francisco. Now, again, if you're not a California resident, writing him or calling, Assemblyman Ting, you may not get a whole lot of response. But this is the deal. I'm going to back off of this. Calling Assemblyman Ting is useless. You don't want to call Assemblyman Ting. You want to call the senator that lives within the area of wherever you are in California, the state, not the federal senator. We're not talking about Dianne Feinstein and John Blank. Anyway, not talking about the U.S. senators. We're talking about our state senators in California. So that's who we need to talk to. And Alex has a question. How soon do you think this will be signed? Well, this is the deal. It's still in the Senate. It has not passed the Senate yet. So if it dies in the Senate, then this is just us talking about something that never happened. Okay, that's what we want. Hopefully, this will die in the Senate. You'll never hear about it again, and you'll say, "What was that thing Lance was talking about a 25% rent reduction that's going to be mandated?" This is the making of the sausage that happens in the legislative process. Now, my concern, and again, I don't want to get political because nothing good can come from this, and I want to list houses and sell houses and rent properties and manage properties. I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I want all of your business, okay? However, if this thing gets out of the Senate, I'm very confident that Governor Newsom will sign it, okay? So you take that for what it's worth. And I just think it would be a horrible, horrible thing for not just rental owners in California. I just think it takes this problem and it just, I don't want to say not that it could get any worse. I think it could make this problem worse. I absolutely think it can make this problem worse. Okay, I don't see anything else in the chat box. Again, I can't open the Q&A, Drake, so I see one in there.
I'd unmute myself. Yeah, just a confirmation said for most small property owners, that bill would kill us.
Yes. Yeah, it's horrible. Well, yeah, it would. And so whoever said that, I agree with you 100%. It would be a horrible thing. And again, we could go on for hours about this, but it would kill you. But this is probably what it would also do. There would also be probably a companion bill that would say, okay, wait a minute, now we have to do something to help the landlords, although it would be a different bill. And maybe that would include mortgage forbearance or mortgage moratoriums or loan modifications. And trust me, I have a lot of experience with this in the foreclosure side. And maybe some of you took advantage, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but maybe you took advantage of some of the loan modification processes. Maybe you fell victim to some of those processes. Maybe you had tenants in your property that weren't paying rent. I don't know, but all I can tell you is, based upon my experience, it takes a problem like that's this big, and it makes it a lot bigger and a lot longer. Okay, I think I do see Ann. You have your hand up. Ann, did you already ask a question or did you want to say something? Other than that, I don't think we have any other questions. And I'm going to give you just a few seconds to type something in the chat box if you had a question. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap this up. We will do, I'll tell you what, just to give this an idea, we will do another call in 2 weeks. So whatever 2 weeks from today is, by then we should have a very good idea of where the tenants are paying their rent. I feel pretty good today, and I did not feel good 3 days ago. I really didn't. I did not. I was dreading May 1st. So hopefully we get to May 3rd, 4th, 5th, and we're good. So we'll give you an update in 2 weeks, and we'll also do a presentation on those accessory dwelling units, and I'll have one of my partners who knows a lot more about that here, and we can take some time and we can go through that as well. Okay. All right, guys, be safe, peace and love, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.